The alert sounded across the Stellar Assembly's monitoring station, its deep tone echoing through crystalline corridors. The night shift crew jumped to attention, their various appendages flying across control panels as they tracked an unknown vessel entering their space. The ship was unlike anything in their database, dark, angular, and bristling. With what their sensors identified as weapon ports, Officer Reed, his scaled skin reflecting the soft blue light of the monitor, leaned forward to study the readings. The vessel's hull was made of materials that partially blocked their scans, and its power signature was completely foreign. As the ranking member of the Assembly's Border Patrol, he had to make a quick decision: send the standard greeting package. Reed ordered, his tail twitching nervously. The communications officer complied, broadcasting the carefully crafted welcome message that had successfully initiated first contact. With 12 different species over the past century, the response came faster than expected. The unknown ship transmitted back in perfect assembly standard language: "This is Captain James of the Earth vessel Thunder. We come in peace and seek diplomatic contact." The assembly crew exchanged worried looks. No new species had ever responded so quickly or in their language. It suggested advanced translation technology far beyond what they expected from a first contact scenario. Reed noticed something else that made his scales bristle. The vessel was maintaining a position that kept its broadside away from the assembly station, while presenting minimal target profile. It was a defensive posture that spoke of military training. His security training screamed that this was not a normal exploration vessel. Captain James R. transmitted, trying to keep his voice steady. "Please power down your weapon systems and assume the standard docking approach." The standard protocol had worked dozens of times before. New species always complied, eager to join the peaceful assembly. The Thunder response was not what he expected. "With respect, Officer, we will maintain our current position and defensive capabilities until diplomatic protocols are established. We are happy to arrange a neutral meeting point." The assembly crew's anxiety spiked. No species had ever refused to power down weapons before. The humans' caution suggested either past trauma or hostile intent. Reed's training manual had no protocol for this situation. "This is highly irregular," Reed transmitted, his claws clicking against the console. "We must insist you comply with standard safety protocols." He gestured to his weapons officer to power up the station's defensive screens. "Just a precaution," he told himself. The human vessel sensors detected the power surge. Instantly, its reaction was remarkable. In the space of a few heartbeats, the Thunder executed a series of precise maneuvers that no assembly ship could match, maintaining its defensive posture while activating what appeared to be a much more sophisticated shielding system. "Please be advised," Captain James transmitted, his tone professional but firm, "that any aggressive actions will be met with an appropriate defensive response. We are here to establish peaceful contact, but we will not compromise our security. Perhaps we could start with an exchange of cultural information to build trust." Reed's crew was now in complete disarray. The Thunder's display of superior maneuverability had shaken their confidence. Their sensors indicated that the human vessel's weapon systems remained powered down despite its defensive posture, a show of restraint that confused them even more. In his rising panic, Reed made a crucial mistake. He authorized a warning shot, a low-powered energy pulse, deliberately aimed to pass harmlessly by the Thunder bow. It was meant to demonstrate the assembly's military capability and encourage compliance. The human response would be studied by assembly military analysts for years to come. The Thunder didn't dodge or return fire. Instead, it launched a small, swift drone that intercepted the energy pulse with a precise counterbeam, dissipating it harmlessly. The drone then returned to its bay, all before Reed's crew could even track its movement properly. "We acknowledge your warning shot," Captain James transmitted, still maintaining that professional calm that was starting to unnerve. "We choose to interpret it as a cultural misunderstanding rather than an act of hostility. However, we strongly advise against further weapons fire. Let us be clear, we possess scientific, defensive and offensive capabilities that we would prefer not to demonstrate. Shall we return to discussing diplomatic options?" Reed stared at his display, trying to process what he had just witnessed. The humans had just effortlessly neutralized what should have been an overwhelming show of force. then immediately offered peace talks. He realized with a sinking feeling that first contact protocols would never be the same after this encounter. Marcus sat in his dimly lit office watching the recording of the Thunder's encounter for the 800th time. His scaled fingers traced patterns on his desk as he studied every detail of the human ship's movements. As the assembly's top intelligence officer, he had seen many first contact situations, but none like this. The data from the encounter scrolled across his screen. The Thunder Hall was made of materials that should not exist according to assembly science. Its movements defied their understanding of spatial mechanics. But what truly fascinated Marcus was the crew's behavior. Play audio segment 4 again. He commanded his computer. Captain James's calm voice filled the room. We choose to interpret it as a cultural misunderstanding rather than an act of hostility. Such restraint after being fired upon was unprecedented. A quiet knock interrupted his thoughts. His assistant entered carrying a data crystal. Sir, we found something in the old AR arrives. The humans' home planet. It's what we classify as a death world. Marcus' scales shifted. Color and surprise. Death worlds were theoretical places where life should be. Impossible planets with crushing gravity, extreme temperatures, and deadly atmospheric conditions. The fact that humans evolved on such a world explained much about their ship's capabilities. He pulled up the planetary data. Earth's gravity was nearly twice what most assembly species considered comfortable. Its atmospheric pressure would crush most of their lungs. Storms could level cities, oceans could swallow continents, and temperature swings could freeze or boil blood. Yet humans not only survived there, they thrived. Look at their historical records. His assistant pointed out they'd been fighting wars among themselves for thousands of years. Their weapons technology evolved from throwing rocks to splitting atoms in less time than it took us to do developed spaceflight. Marcus watched footage of human history with growing amazement. They had turned their harsh world's resources into tools of both creation and destruction. Their wars had driven innovation at an incredible pace, yet they had somehow avoided destroying themselves. Instead, they had emerged unified, turning their warlike instincts into defensive capabilities. The door burst open. General Pike, the assembly's military commander, stormed in. His facial tentacles were dark with anger. Have you seen the latest scans? 3 more human vessels just appeared at the edge of our space. We must act now. Marcus rose slowly, his tail helping him balance. General, I strongly advise against any military action. These humans, they're not like any species we've encountered. Look at this data. He showed the general footage of Earth's natural disasters, hurricanes that could cover continents, earthquakes that could shatter cities, volcanic eruptions that could darken skies. This is what they evolved to survive. Their entire species developed under conditions we consider unsurvivable. Their technology, their ships, even their bodies are built to endure things we can barely imagine. The general's tentacles paled slightly, but his voice remained firm. All the more reason to contain them now before they become a greater threat. The Assembly C meets in 1 hour to discuss military options. After the general left, Marcus slumped in his chair. He pulled up the footage of the Thunder one more time, watching its perfect defensive maneuvers. The humans could have easily destroyed the Assembly's patrol station. Instead, they had shown remarkable restraint. He thought about Captain James's words about cultural misunderstanding. Perhaps that was the key. The Assembly saw the human defensive capability as aggression because they had never needed such defenses themselves. They had evolved on peaceful worlds, developed in safe spaces. The humans had been forged in fire, shaped by challenges that would have killed most species. Marcus made his decision. He began gathering data for the council meeting. He would show them the truth about humans, not just their powerful ships and advanced weapons, but their capacity for restraint, their ability to choose peace, even when they had the power to wage war. His assistant watched him work. Do you think the council will listen? Marcus's scales shifted to a determined blue. They must, because if they don't, if they choose to attack these humans. He looked at the footage of Earth's storms and wars, of humanity's long history of survival against impossible odds. If they choose war, I fear the Assembly will learn too late why the humans' warning systems are so much better than their weapons. The Assembly's defensively moved through space in perfect formation, their sleek ships Gleaming under distant starlight 50 vessels strong, it was the largest military force gathered in the past 100 years. General Pike stood on his command ship's bridge watching tactical displays. With grim satisfaction, the human vessels would soon be surrounded on the Thunder. Captain James received the fleet deployment data with a tired sock. The humans had tried everything to avoid this moment. They had sent peace offers, cultural exchanges, and trade proposals. The assembly had responded by gathering warships. Sir, his tactical officer, reported they're forming a containment grid standard encirclement pattern. Their weapons are charged, but not locked. James nodded, noting how the assembly ships move like dancers in a carefully practiced routine. Their tactics were textbook perfect, and that was the problem. They fought like people who had only practiced war in simulators, never faced it in reality. Send one last message, James ordered. Inform them that while we recognize their tactical positioning, we strongly advise against hostile action. Remind them that we still prefer diplomatic solutions. The assembly fleet continued its advance. On his flagship, General Pike received the human message with a dismissive wave of his tentacles. They're trying to delay us. While their reinforcements arrive, begin the containment procedure. Marcus burst onto the flagship's bridge, his scales dark with exhaustion. He had spent hours trying to convince the council to stop this madness. General, please, the data shows their ships are far more advanced than we thought. This attack will demonstrate the assembly's power. Pike interrupted. All ships execute pattern 7. Let's show these humans how real space combat works. The assembly fleet moved with perfect coordination, their ships forming an elaborate attack pattern designed to overwhelm any defense energy. Beams lanced out from dozens of vessels, creating a web of deadly fire that no known ship could evade. James watched the incoming fire with professional interest. Tactical: activate countermeasures. Standard defense only, no return fire. Unless directly threatened. What happened next would reshape the assembly's understanding of warfare forever. The Thunder simply disappeared. One moment it was there, the next it had somehow slipped between the gaps in the assembly's perfect attack pattern. The massive energy beach passed through empty space. Impossible. Pike's tentacles writhed in confusion. No ship can move that fast. Recalibrate and fire again. The assembly fleet adjusted their second barrage, even more precise than the first. This time the Thunder didn't evade. Instead, the energy beams seemed to bend around its hull, dissipating harmlessly into space. The human ship's defensive technology was beyond anything the assembly had imagined. Sir James, tactical officer, reported 3 of their ships are moving to firing positions above us. Their power signatures suggest they're preparing something bigger. James straightened his uniform. Show them our real capabilities. Tactical demonstration 3, please. No direct hits. The Thunder's response was elegant in its simplicity. Small drones barely visible to assembly sensors launched from its hull. They moved faster than any assembly tracking system could follow, executing a complex dance through the fleet. Each drone passed close to a warship's main power core, sending out a precise pulse that temporarily disrupted its systems. One by one, assembly ships went dark, their weapons powering down their engines, stalling. The drones completed their mission without firing a single shot or causing any real damage. Within minutes, half the assembly fleet floated helplessly in space on the flagship. Gridge. Marcus watched with a mixture of horror and admiration. General, he said quietly, those drones could have destroyed every ship they targeted. The humans are showing us mercy. Pike's tentacles had gone pale, his mighty fleet rendered helpless by a single human vessel, and yet his ships were undamaged, his crews unharmed. This wasn't warfare as the assembly understood it. This was something else entirely. The Thunder's next transmission was short. We have demonstrated a fraction of our defensive capabilities. Your ships will regain power in approximately 10 minutes. No damage has been done to your vessels or crew. We now invite you to consider the benefits of peaceful diplomatic relations. James sat back in his command chair, hoping this display would be enough. He didn't want to imagine what would happen if the assembly forced humans to demonstrate their actual combat capabilities. Sometimes he thought the kindest thing you could do for an opponent was to show them why they shouldn't fight you at all. The assembly's main library had never been so crowded. Research seers from 15 different species huddled around display screens watching human historical records. With growing amazement, the footage showed scenes that seemed impossible: humans fighting in frozen wastelands, crossing burning deserts, diving into ocean depths, and even leaving their protective suits to walk in space. Marcus moved between the groups, his tail twitching as he listened to their discussions. After the fleet's embarrassing defeat, the Assembly Council had finally agreed to study humans properly. What they found shocked them to their CES. Look at this, a researcher called out, her feathers rustling with excitement. They fought 2 planet-wide wars within 50 years of discovering powered flight. Their technology advanced more in those decades than we did in centuries. Another researcher, his crystalline body reflecting the screen's light, added, and yet they didn't destroy themselves. They came closer than any species we've ever studied, but they always pulled back from the edge. Marcus stopped at a screen showing ancient human battles. Their earliest warriors used simple metal tools, fighting face to face. As time passed, their weapons grew more sophisticated: gunpowder, explosives, machines. But something else emerged in the footage: rules of war, medical care for enemies, peace treaties. Sir, a young Abe interrupted his thoughts. You need to see this. More human ships have arrived. The observation deck was packed with Assembly officials. Through the massive windows, they watched 5 human vessels move into position around the Thunder. Each ship was different, some sleek and fast, others large and powerful. They moved with the same impossible grace as the Thunder, their formations perfect. Their ships, an engineer observed, they're all warships. But look at the modifications. That one has extra sensor arrays, that one's built for rescue operations. Even their military vessels are designed to help people. General Pike stood at the back of the room, his tentacles now a thoughtful shade of blue. The arrival of more human ships should have terrified him. Instead, he found himself fascinated by their restraint. His fleet's weapons had been back online for days, yet the humans hadn't retaliated for the attack. They a paradox. Marcus explained to the gathered officials, their entire history is full of war, but it taught them to value peace. They built powerful weapons, but prefer not to use them. They're stronger than us, yet they keep trying to talk. A new transmission arrived from the Thunder. Captain James's voice filled the room. We understand your fear. Every space faring race we've met has reacted the same way. But consider this, we could have destroyed your fleet. Instead, we disabled it temporarily and without casualties. Doesn't that tell you something about our intentions? The Assembly officials murmured among themselves. They had studied the drone footage carefully. The human devices could have easily destroyed their ship's power course. Instead, they had chosen the more difficult task of temporarily disabling them. An ancient human military text appeared on the main screen, translated into Umbli standard. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. Marcus watched understanding dawn in the eyes of his fellow officials. The humans weren't showing off their power. They were demonstrating their wisdom. Each careful action showed not just their military might, but their commitment to avoiding unnecessary conflict. There's something else in their historical records. A researcher added quietly, humans have a saying, the more you sweat in peace, you bleed in war. They maintain their military strength precisely because they don't want to use it. Through the window, they watched as the human ships began a series of coordinated maneuvers. It wasn't a battle formation, it was a dance, a demonstration of skill and control. The Assembly officials found themselves holding their breath at the display of precision and power, all carefully contained. General Pike finally broke the silence. We've been looking at this all wrong. Their weapons aren't a threat, they're a shield. Behind that shield, they're offering us something we never expected from a species so powerful. Marcus nodded, his scales shifting to a hopeful green. They're offering us a chance to learn from them, not just about warfare, but about strength through restraint. The question is, are we wise enough to accept? The Assembly's grand meeting chamber had never felt so tense. Marcus stood by the entrance watching as final preparations were made for the first face-to-face contact with humans. The circular room's crystal walls glowed with soft light, while security teams checked every corner. For the 100th time, the human diplomatic vessel has docked. His assistant reported their Ambassador Thompson is ready to enter with Captain James. Marcus noticed how the Assembly Council members shifted nervously in their seats. They had all seen the footage of Earth, trying to imagine what kind of beings could survive such a harsh world. The doors slid open, and everyone held their breath. Ambassador Thompson walked in first, followed by Captain James. The assembly members stared in surprise. They had expected massive armored creatures. Instead, they saw beings who looked almost fragile in their simple dress uniforms. No visible weapons, no protective gear, just confident smiles and straight backs. Honorable Counsel Thompson spoke in perfect assembly standard. "We thank you for this opportunity to meet in person." His voice was warm, carrying none of the hardness they had expected from a Death World species. The council leader, her crystalline form shimmering, responded. "Carefully, we admit our surprise. Your body seem unprotected." Captain James smiled. "Our greatest protection has always been our ability to adapt and understand. We'd rather discuss art and science than demonstrate our military capabilities." Again, Marcus watched as the tension in the room slowly began to fade. The humans moved with easy grace despite the chamber's lighter gravity. They showed no fear despite being surrounded by alien species. Their confidence wasn't aggressive, it was simply part of who they were. Thompson opened the small case he had brought, revealing beautiful holographic displays of Earth cities, art, and achievements. "We want to share our culture with you. Yes, our world shaped us to be strong, but it also taught us to create beauty in harsh conditions." The display showed human music concerts, space stations that doubled as gardens, warships converted into rescue vessels. Each image challenged the assembly's assumptions about these supposed warriors. "We've studied your history," the council leader admitted. "Your wars taught us the value of peace." Thompson finished. "Each conflict pushed us to advance, but also showed us what we could lose. Our military strength isn't about conquest, it's about protecting what we've built." Captain James stepped forward, activating another hologram. This one showed the Thunder defensive systems in detail. "We believe in transparency. Our technology isn't meant to threaten you. We developed it because space is dangerous, and we want to protect not just ourselves, but potential allies." The council members leaned forward, their fear forgotten in their fascination. The human ship systems were incredible, designed not just for combat, but for rescue operations, scientific research, and exploration. "Your ships," a technical advisor noted, "they're far more advanced than the rest of your technology." "Why?" Thompson's answer surprised them all. "Because space is like our oldest oceans. Beautiful but unforgiving. We believe any ship that ventures into it should be able to help others in need. Every human vessel is built to be a guardian, not just a warrior." Marcus noticed how the humans always positioned themselves to appear smaller, less threatening. They chose words carefully, shared information freely, and responded to every question with patience. It was a different kind of strength than the assembly had expected. "We propose the joint project," Thompson continued. "Let us teach you what we know about ship design and defense. In return, we want to learn from your experiences in peaceful cooperation between species." The council leader's crystal form glowed brighter, a sign of strong emotion. "Who would share your military technology with us after we try to attack you?" James's response was simple. "The best way to prevent future misunderstandings is to help each other grow stronger and wiser. Strong allies make for lasting peace." Marcus watched understanding dawn across the faces of every assembly member. These humans had mastered something more impressive than advanced technology. They had learned how to remain peaceful despite being powerful, and gentle despite being strong. The council leader rose. "Her decision. May perhaps we have something to teach each other. After all, welcome to assembly. Space friends from Earth." The attack came without warning. 10 assembly warships, their identification markers disabled, dropped out of faster than light travel near the human diplomatic vessel. Their weapons were already charged, their intentions clear. The hardline faction had made its move. Marcus watched in horror from the assembly station's command center as the rogue ships opened fire. His scales turned pale with fear, not for the humans, but for the foolish attackers. "Try to contact them," he shouted. "Make them stop." Before he fell silent as he watched the human response unfold, the diplomatic vessel didn't run or hide. Instead, it activated a defensive shield unlike anything they'd seen before. The shield didn't just block the incoming fire, it caught it, held it, and then harmlessly dispersed the energy into space. Captain James's voice came through clear and calm on all channels. Attention. Unauthorized assembly vessels, we recognize you're acting without official sanction. Power down your weapons. This is your only warning. The rogue ships responded by launching missiles, dozens of them, enough to overwhelm any known defense system on the diplomatic vessels. Bridge James watched their approach with an expression of sad resignation. Defensive pattern. Echo, he ordered. Quietly, I'll disable only, no casualties. What happened next left Marcus and every other observer speechless. Small points of light emerged from the diplomatic vessel, moving faster than assembly tracking systems could follow. They weren't weapons, they were microscopic drones, each one targeting a specific missile. The drones matched speed with the missiles, attached themselves, and simply turned them off. The missiles went dark, drifting harmlessly through space. Not one exploded, not one had to be destroyed. The humans had turned a deadly attack into an impromptu demonstration of their technical superiority. Impossible, whispered one of Marcus's technicians. Their drones bypassed our best security systems. Like they weren't even there. The rogue ships, seeing their missiles neutralized, moved to surround the diplomatic vessel. Their commanders, desperate now, prepared to ram it. Surely, they thought even humans couldn't stop 10 ships at once without using lethal force. They were wrong. The human vessel released a pulse of energy, gentle but precise. It washed over the attacking ships like a wave. One by one, their engines shut down, their weapons went dark. Even their life support systems were gently powered down to minimum levels, leaving the crews safe but helpless. This is Captain James to all assembly security forces. The human commander transmitted, we have disabled 10 rogue vessels that attacked us without provocation. Their crews are unharmed. They require immediate pickup and medical evaluation. We will remain on station to assist as needed. Marcus couldn't believe what he was hearing. The humans hadn't just won, they had done so without firing a single shot or harming a single attacker. His investigation would later reveal that the hardliners had expected, even wanted, a violent response. They had hoped to prove humans were as dangerous as they claimed. Instead, they had proven something else entirely. Assembly rescue ships arrived quickly to find the human diplomatic vessel, providing emergency power to the disabled ships, ensuring their crews remained safe and comfortable. Captain James had even sent over medical supplies, though they weren't needed. Why? One of the captured hardline commanders later asked during questioning. Why didn't you destroy us? When we attacked, you had every right. James's response was recorded and would later become part of the assembly's basic training. Because true strength isn't about destroying your enemies, it's about being powerful enough to show mercy even when others might think they don't deserve it. Marcus stood in the observation room, watching this assembly. Security forces took the rogue crews into custody. The human diplomatic vessel remained in position, its presence now a symbol not of fear, but of protection. They could have killed them all, an assembly officer noted quietly. Their technology, their weapons, they could probably conquer our entire space if they wanted. That's exactly why they won't, Marcus replied, his scales shifting to a deep blue of understanding. The humans don't need to prove they're powerful, they need to prove they can be trusted with that power. And today they did exactly that. 1 year after the failed attack, the assembly space looked very different. Human ships now patrol alongside assembly vessels, their joint crews working together to protect trade routes and assist ships in distress. The sight of the thunder, once feared, now brought relief to troubled vessels across the sector. Marcus stood on the observation deck of the new Joint Command Station, his scales reflecting the soft blue light of nearby stars. Behind him, teams of humans and assembly species worked together at control stations, coordinating patrol routes and monitoring space traffic. The latest patrol report, sir, his assistant said, handling him a data pad. The report showed 3 successful rescue missions in the past week alone. A human ship had helped an assembly freighter escape a solar storm. An assembly cruiser upgraded with human technology had protected a human colony ship from asteroid debris. Captain James walked onto the deck, now wearing a new uniform that combined human and assembly designs. Marcus, my friend, ready for the graduation ceremony. The ceremony would mark the first class of assembly officers trained in human defensive techniques, but they had learned far more than just military skills. The humans had taught them about adaptation, innovation, and the importance of being ready for anything space could throw at them. The council leader is nervous about your demonstration, Marcus said, his tail swaying with amusement. She still remembers what your ships can do. James smiled. Then she'll be pleased. We're not demonstrating weapons today. Instead, the graduates will show how they've learned to convert weapon energy into shield power. Defense over offense. Just as we promised, they walked together to the massive training hall. Hundreds of assembly citizens had gathered to watch. On the training floor, 20 assembly officers stood in formation alongside their human instructors. Their ships waited in space nearby, each one modified with new defensive systems. The council leader began her speech. 1 year ago, we feared the humans. We saw their power and assumed they must be conquerors. Today, we understand that true strength comes in many forms. The humans didn't just show us better ways to defend ourselves, they showed us better ways to think. The demonstration began. The assembly ships, guided by their newly trained crews, performed complex maneuvers that would have been impossible a year ago. They turned attacks into defensive energy, transformed weapons into shields, and showed how to disable enemies without destroying them. Look at their faces, James whispered to Marcus. A year ago, they were terrified of our technology. Now they've made it their own, and made it better. He was right. The assembly crews had taken human principles and adapted them to their own ships and styles. They hadn't just copied human techniques, they had evolved them, adding their own innovations to create something new in the space above. More ships arrived for the ceremony. Human vessels flew in formation with assembly ships, their crews working together as if they'd been doing it forever. Each ship displayed both human and assembly markings. No longer separate forces, but one unified fleet. Did you ever imagine this? Marcus asked, watching an assembly ship demonstrate its new rescue capabilities. When you first arrived, did you think we'd end up here? James watched his human and assembly crew members congratulated each other on the successful demonstration. We hoped on Earth. We learned that the best way to prevent war is to show others that peace is longer. We didn't come here to conquer, we came to connect. The ceremony ended with a new tradition. Each graduating officer received a badge that combined human and assembly symbols, but more importantly, they received a simple message: the strongest shield is the one you never have to use later. As the celebration continued, Marcus found himself back on the observation deck. A ship's warning light flashed across space. TA arriving human war vessel. But now, instead of causing fear, it brought smiles to assembly faces. The warning had become a greeting, a sign that help and friendship were nearby. Send the new response, Marcus ordered, his scales glowing with pride. The station's computers transmitted the message they now sent to every arriving human ship. Welcome friends, thank you for watching the stars with us.